Hi, in this video, we are going to discuss how you as an individual, how you as a fresher, or how you as a student can actually excel in computer programming. Now, in this video, I'm going to discuss every single details, especially I'm going to discuss the bonus steps which are going to make you actually a better programmer. Now, obviously, why I have not mentioned that you can become an expert, because there is no such thing as an expert, because an expert is someone who is constantly learning. So it is better to say you can become a good programmer compared to saying that you can become an expert. Now, when we talk about a good programmer, what makes them good? Well, the answer is quite obvious. Well, what makes them good is their ability to learn new things. Now, they're not stuck somewhere. They are actually constantly learning and they're ever evolving their skill. Secondly, they're actually constantly learning from other people. So there are so many websites. If I talk about, like, let's say if you talk about being a good programmer, and if you don't know that, okay, you're learning a certain programming language, how will you find a good programmer? Well, GitHub is the ultimate source for you. So obviously you can go to the website of GitHub, you can open the repository which are coded in that particular language, and you can start learning using those repository, and you can start learning how to actually write an efficient code. But now, obviously, this is not going to make you a good programmer. There are certain steps, if I talk about, or I should say the mindset, if I may, or the roadmap which has to be followed, which we are going to learn now. The first point which I have in my list is quite obvious: decide. Now, the biggest problem, obviously, a lot of students send us the query. A lot of students, when I meet them, they send me this query or they ask me this question like, how can I become a good programmer? So, well, obviously, there is no such pill, if I may, I have with me, which I can give it to you so that you can become a good programmer, or I should say an efficient programmer. Well, obviously, for a very specific reason, this is a skill which you have to learn on your own. Well, if you're not feeling well, obviously a doctor can give you a pill, but if you're not a good programmer, this is something you have to work on. There is no tool can actually help you, but if you don't have the specific mindset, it will be very, very difficult for you. So when I say decide, you have to actually aim, you have to make a mindset that you have to become an efficient or good programmer. There are no excuses to that. You cannot simply start playing games and say, hey, I want to become a good programmer and I'm not able to become one. When you talk about becoming a good programmer, you have to have this kind of a mindset, you have to have this kind of a mentality that whenever you find time, you're actually improving your skill set, and that's what makes you a good programmer, or I should say an efficient programmer. When we talk about actually the experts in the industry, or I should say the people who have good programming skill, you won't find them actually parting along and thinking, okay, I want to become a good programmer. When they know they have to become an efficient, they decide and they act on this particular thing. So don't be confused. Don't waste your time. Try to understand that if that is something you want, you have to actually take a steps towards that. And the first step is obviously deciding that you want to become one. Now, secondly, a lot of people actually get lost in the syntax of the programming language. If I talk about, there are so many programming languages. If I talk about, we have Go, we have Python, we have C++, we have C#, we have Java, we have Ruby, and there are so many other programming languages. Now, the problem is, what students try to do, what freshers actually try to do, they try to learn everything. So they will say, okay, I will learn Go, I will learn Python, I will learn C++, I will learn C#, I will learn Java, I will learn Ruby. The problem is, all these programming languages are almost same. Yes, they have certain different types of capabilities. They have different types of pros and cons, but ultimately at the ground level, they are working similar. Some are built for specific use case, some are built for other specific use case. So you have to understand, if you can master the concepts of programming, this is going to actually become a better base for you. I'll give you an example. When you were a baby, you were starting to learn how to walk. Now, your parents did not teach you how to walk on ice. They did not teach you how to walk on stairs. They did not teach you how to walk on a surface which is wet. They just only told you the concepts of walking, how you should walk. And after you excelled in the concept of learning how to walk, you started walking anywhere. So this is what makes you an efficient, or I should say, this will what make you a better programmer. You have to first excel in the concepts of programming. What is object-oriented programming? What is a variable? What is a class? What is an object? These concepts, if you can understand these concepts, you can actually learn these programming languages quite easily, because you just have to learn the syntax there. Obviously that is not readable. So you have to learn the syntax. So try to understand. Once you actually learn the concepts of it, it is very easy to excel in the other programming languages because they only have a different syntax, nothing else. Syntax is something which you can learn quite easily. Concept is something which you have to actually grill, or I should say drill down, because they are something which make the base of a program or a programming language. So make sure you are actually focusing on learning the concepts rather than going into and learning different syntax. The next step which I would say in my list is obviously picking a programming language. Now, obviously, there are so much debate around the industry. What is the programming language should you learn? What is the programming language you should learn if you're aiming for this, aiming for that, and aiming for XYZ? Now, let's try to understand one thing. First of all, you cannot actually pick a language on random. You have to understand what is the right programming language for you, because that is going to make a base for you. Now, obviously, since I mentioned in the previous slide, if you can actually learn the concept, it is very easy for you to actually learn a programming language. But why I'm conflicting here? Well, I'm not conflicting. Once you learn the concept, you have to actually excel in one programming language so you can understand, okay, at what extent I can actually move. Now, obviously, the question comes in, okay, Avinash, what is that programming language I should learn? Well, obviously, I cannot answer you here. Well, in that scenario, what I would request, please comment down what kind of aim you have, what kind of a career are you aiming for. In that scenario, I can actually tell you what kind of a programming language or first programming language you should pick. Or I have a video in my channel where you can actually learn what are the programming languages, or I should say the first programming language you should pick. So here, when we are talking about picking up a language, it is going to actually help us decide, because what will happen if you're learning the concept, once you have learned the concept, you will say, okay, how to do this in this language, how to do this in this specific language. So your mind will not get confused. You will not be actually like pulled towards a programming language just because it sounds sexy. So make sure you decide and you actually start learning a single individual language, if I may, because you want to make sure that you are able to excel and gain the as much as knowledge which is there for that particular language. If you have seen Karate Kid, the movie, you must have seen in some instance, or I should say in the very early age of the career of that particular person, the instructor always said, do just one thing. That is it. I'm not able to recall what was the duration of that. So that was around 6 months to 12 months. What he was trying to say is that you have to just excel in one thing, just do that. And once you're done with that, then move towards the next step. So here what I'm trying to say is, now obviously I'm not your mentor or like guru like that. Spend 6 months blindly in that particular programming language. Why? When you commit this amount of time, you actually have a frame of mind, or I should say mindset, that okay, you have to spend this amount of time for this specific language. No more dating any other languages, no more thinking about any other languages. I'm just going to live my life with this particular programming language. When you give this kind of a commitment, your brain actually starts thinking, okay, now how will I actually learn this programming language quite efficiently? Just imagine you're learning a language like this, or I should say learning programming like this. For first 15 days, you're doing C++, then you're doing Java, then you're doing Python, then you're doing Ruby, and after that, like let's say you're doing C#. And in a span of 90 days, you have done these programming languages. Now, will you call yourself an expert? Will you call yourself as a good programmer? Will you call yourself as an efficient programmer? Well, you may call yourself, well, that is going to be a lie. I'm not going to call you a good programmer for a very specific reason. You have learned the syntax of it. You have not learned in depth about those programming languages. Try to understand. A person who has an expertise, or I should say a person who is an efficient, is the person who understands ins and out of that particular programming language. So in this particular step, you have to make sure that you're spending 6 months at least blindly, so that you can actually commit yourself and you can start learning properly. Now, when we talk about spending 6 months, what to do after that? Avinash, you're actually confusing me, you are scaring me. I just have 6 months available with me. Well, obviously, if you want to become an expert, this is what you have to do. Now, what you have to do is building live projects. When I was learning Java, what I did, After I completed this 6 months process of learning almost all things related to Java, I'm not going to say I'm an expert because obviously I've lost the practice of Java. What I did, I actually went to different websites which are offering certain, I don't know, list kind of a thing. I don't remember them. And I emailed them that, hey, I'm planning to build a desktop application for your particular website using your API. Sorry, not UPI, API. Now, obviously, they gave me the access to the APIs. It was a free version of the application. I used it. I asked my friends to use it, and they had so many feedback on that. Obviously, none of them were good. But one thing I learned about that, when I started building live projects, I started learning, okay, how I'm supposed to do something which I was not even thinking of. When my friend said, Avinash, why this button is looking like this, I started thinking, okay, this might be a wrong thing I've made. When someone clicked on a button, it was loading forever. I went back to the code and I realized, okay, this is a buggy code which I've written. So what is happening? I'm getting a feedback from my team, or I should say I'm getting a feedback from my friends, which would not possible if I was not making a live project. For a very specific reason, live project is something which you make for others. So once you excel in a programming language, pick a problem around you. A problem can be anything. The problem which I picked was not a very big problem. The only thing I wanted to do, obviously they had the website available already for them. I just said I want to make a desktop application for you guys for free of cost. Obviously the source code was available and everything was there. So you can see if you find a specific problem, the problem can be anything. Like let's say I want an invoice for the canteen. I want an attendance management system. I want to make sure where my friends are. I want to track their live location, something like that. Again, I'm not going to tell you what kind of a live project you should make, but if you make this kind of a live project, you learn a lot of things which you won't even imagine when you started learning a particular programming language for a very specific reason. When you're learning something, you're learning for yourself, but when you're building something for others, you're learning by them, like how things are supposed to be rather than what you had thought. Okay, the next step in our particular video is participating in forums. Now, Avinash, this is too much work for me. Well, obviously it is. If you want to become an expert, if you want to become a good person, obviously, good programmer, you have to make these many steps. Well, what is the advantage of participating in a forum? Well, one thing which I want to mention is obviously we are going to share knowledge and we are going to learn from other people. Someone has a question, what is a constant? And how it is different from a variable. Now you understand this, but that person does not understand it. Can you explain them this concept in such a simpler terms that they can also understand it? Now you're sharing knowledge. Now there is an advanced concept like let's say networking. You don't understand it. Someone has a question how to integrate networking in this particular application which is built using X language. Now you don't know that. You'll go to that particular question and you will see, okay, how these steps I am supposed to follow. What this actually helps you, it helps you actually understand what things are possible in this particular programming language, and secondly, how to do it efficiently. There are forums like Stack Overflow where there are so many experts who have around 10 to 15 years of experience in a particular technology. Just imagine they are sharing their 15 years worth of experience in that particular one question. Don't you think it is going to actually help you? Well, obviously it is going to help you, but what it is going to give you is something which cannot be taken away from you. The understanding of a language from 100 different minds. Currently, when you're learning a language, you're probably using a YouTube video or any other particular coding website or a particular video series, but obviously you're using one mind. One is the person who is the teacher and you are the student. But imagine if you go to forum, you have hundreds of people who are asking hundreds of different types of questions which you may have never seen in your life. Imagine if you can get that kind of a knowledge, you will actually become a very, very good programmer, or I may say an expert. Now, these are all the steps which you are supposed to do to actually excel and become a good programmer. But if you're looking for some more steps which can actually give you the right kind of an exposure or a better exposure, let's discuss in this part of a video, if you're still sticking around. When I started learning Java, technically Java is the first language of object-oriented programming language which I learned by myself, apart from C++, which was obviously taught me in school. When I started learning Java, whenever I had a question, my mentor always used to say that Avinash, you should go to the Java documentation and find out the answer. And when I used to see the documentation, I used to get bored. Okay, what is this? I don't even like it. It is like a dictionary where you have a word and the definition of that particular word. It was like that. But when I started visiting regularly, I started learning, or I should say, I started picking different things which were not even part of my horizon, if I may. Okay, so it could be anything like related to certain APIs, certain system API, or maybe something else which you don't know. But when you talk about the documentation, this is the best representation, or I should say, this is the best way to understand a programming language and its capabilities. Because there are so many programming languages where the documentation also includes a sample code which shows you what you can do with that. So try to understand documentation is going to be something which is going to give you an ample amount of opportunity to learn. Secondly, documentation is 100% of what a programming language can do. Again, I'll repeat, a documentation is something which can represent what a programming language can do 100%. It has everything from the start to the very bottom, or I should say to the very last. So documentation is one place where experts actually visit on a regular basis, not to improve their understanding, not to improve their knowledge, but to actually enhance and learn new things which they did not even know. The final bonus point here is contributing to open source. Now, what is the advantage? What is open source? Again, I'm not going to explain what is open source. Why you should actually contribute? Here are two things. First, it is a community service. You have learned something, share that knowledge, share that expertise in this particular project so other people who are using that project can be benefited. I'll give you a very simple example. Google as a company, or I should say Facebook as a company, Instagram as a company, YouTube as a company are built using open source programming languages like Python. Now what happens? Imagine if Python was not open source, you could not watch this video. So this is the, I should say, advantage of open source. So go there, contribute to open source. Secondly, when you contribute to open source, you're actually working with some of the top mind of that project. I'll give you an example. You must have heard about this library, React. It is maintained by the engineers at Facebook, or I should say Meta. I'll give you another example. You must have heard about Angular library. It is one such library which is actually maintained by Google. There are other people as well, but yes, Google is one of the major contributors to this particular project. So what happens? You are able to interact with these people with whom you can only imagine to meet. So we have React, we have Angular, and there are so many different open source projects. So what happens? You get the idea, you get the understanding, and you actually network with some of the sharpest top minds which are available in this world, which can actually help you enhance your knowledge of a particular programming language. So with this, I hope you are able to understand how you can actually become an expert, or I should say a good programmer. But obviously you must have some questions like what kind of a programming language I should learn, or if I'm in a particular college, I'm a non-IT background, can I do that? So for obviously these kind of questions, put your questions in the comment box and I'll make sure that your questions are answered. And obviously if you're looking for any specialized training, in that case, there is a link in the description of this particular video. Fill that link and let us know what kind of a training or a requirement or a certification you're actually aiming for.